Right, good day, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar on utilizing modern AI in enterprise architecture. My name is Kevin Bowles. I'm the product owner for enterprise architecture at QualiWare. And just to mention, AI has been a consideration of ours for quite some time, and we're really very excited today to discuss the practical value that it can bring to our customers through our AI integration. I'm happy to introduce our two speakers for the webinar. Firstly, our CEO, Kuno Brodersen, and our solution architect, Blair. Before I hand over to Kuno, I just wanted to mention that questions can be raised using the Q&A feature in Teams. We'll try our best to answer as many quick questions as possible during the last 15 minutes of the webinar. And having said that, I'd like to hand over to Kuno to allow him to share some of his knowledge with us on the topic of utilizing modern AI in enterprise architecture. Kuno, thank you.
Thank you. Happy to be here with you guys. We have prepared a little bit of a demo and a conceptual walkthrough of the modern AI use in enterprise architecture. And I'll start by setting up a scene here, and I hope that you can see my screen now. We have two people here. We can call them Ken and Barbie, just pick something. And they need to share some knowledge. Unfortunately, they're not looking at in the same direction. They're not talking to each other. They may not exist in the same time and space. So how can this knowledge be shared across from Ken to Barbie? Ken needs to basically define and design a way to communicate that knowledge. This is when you have QualiWare as a tool, typically done with a use of models. In this case, it's a process network, and most of you will recognize that. And Ken's knowledge will be stored in the QualiWare repository. And it can lie there forever, or at least for many years, or it can be used immediately. So if Barbie wishes to use that knowledge, she can go online, she can go into a browser, a phone, you can have all sorts of different devices that you can imagine. And at a certain point in time, Barbie will see that model and she'll understand fully the model, and the knowledge has then been shared from Ken to Barbie. When we talk about knowledge sharing in general, there are some terms that we might as well just go through here. Ken is externalizing his knowledge. He's taking his own brain and putting that into a formal structure. So it becomes explicit knowledge sitting in the QualiWare repository. And Barbie is internalizing that same knowledge, so it becomes available to her in her brain, and she can use it for whatever she needs to do with that knowledge. So that's a classical knowledge sharing. You could claim that most of our clients actually do this every day. Maybe they don't call it knowledge sharing, but it is really a question of collaborating knowledge across the enterprise. Now, the question is, can we benefit from AI services in that knowledge sharing situation? Let's see what we can do with this. So first of all, we can help Ken building the model. So if we use an AI service, there would be a benefit for Ken to be guided through the creation of the model. So those AI services is certainly something we could focus on. We could also use the AI service to analyze the model, to find pattern in the models across the enterprise architecture, and to look at completion and overlap between the models. This is something we already have certain analysis for, but we could benefit from AI in order to make those analysis a little bit more operational maybe. And then finally, we can help Barbie understand that knowledge, understand the model, help her guide, help her going through the knowledge and internalizing the knowledge. It is not the first time QualiWare is focusing on AI. We actually have a couple of projects in our past. First of all, we have built a picture to model. It's based on Microsoft Cognitive Services and something called OpenCV. And it allows you to take a picture of your whiteboard or something else when you leave the meeting and send that picture to the AI service that we provide, and it will return a model that you can put into your repository. The correctiveness of picture recognition right now in that service is 92%. So if you have a triangle, it becomes a triangle. If it's a circle, it becomes a circle, and so on. So it's quite accurate, if you wish. The other thing we could do, and that we've done, is to build a chatbot. We use the cognitive services and Skype. So you can see, since we deployed this in Skype, it's a couple of years ago. And we actually tried to build a chatbot where we could chat with the content of the repository. So you could ask the chatbot, you could type into Skype, who's responsible for the process, design the solution. Unfortunately, the chatbot was quite stupid. You actually had to know the answer before you post the question. So it wasn't everything that we worked with back then that in AI that were accepted. In fact, the picture to model exists today. The chatbot, we deleted that. I would say the picture to model exists today. Gartner called it very innovative, and they were looking forward to seeing how our clients would benefit from the picture to model AI service. And we can say safely that no client have had any problems with that service. In fact, nobody has used it. So it's not something that people have been lining up to use. It may be for different reasons. One, they may not know it's there. Two, their pictures of whiteboards do not look like process models. So therefore, there's no reason to send it to QualiWare's AI service. In other words, we have tried out with AI service and integrating AI services into our knowledge sharing toolset for a while. Now, this one over here, the service that will help Barbie understand the model. Microsoft has introduced something called Copilot that is a little bit more intelligent, a new generation of that chatbot. Of course, we all know what we're talking about here, the GPT services. And Microsoft will be the technology that we be using when we renew our AI integration into our repository. And Russell will come back a little later with more information about that. The other thing that we've done is to focus on the build the model area. So, and we have new QualiWare features out in the latest release. So we can say we can help Ken create models, so in externalizing his knowledge. And then bring us to a very crucial question here. How do we actually organize knowledge? And we're using something that is called ontologies. And the ontology is sort of an underlying structure on knowledge. The whole QualiWare meta model is one huge ontology. Pascal Negros from QualiWare in Paris has this quote: an ontology is an explicit representation of concepts, relationship, and rules, formally describing the knowledge about a given domain of interest. So if we want to know something about the procurement process, there is an ontology that can define what are the concepts and what is the structure of such knowledge. And that is, of course, the meta model. So QualiWare uses ontologies to organize and communicate knowledge. That's just a fact. So many other people do that. There are ontologies all around the world. We introduced this more than a year ago into our standard tool set. So industry organizations, universities, etc., they will offer ontologies to describe their domain. SNOMED CT is the biggest one. It's a global standard for health concepts and terms. It has more than 350,000 concepts in it. So you can say, well, and it's used by doctors who operate you. So you should be very happy that they actually agreed on a specific set of terms. So when somebody tells a surgeon that he needs to remove the appendix of somebody, he will actually remove the appendix and not go in and tear out the last 50 pages of a book somewhere. So concepts and terms are important for communicating and sharing knowledge, and this is based on ontologies. Another ontology that we all are aware of, but we may not recognize that, is the FOAAF ontology. It's an acronym for friend of a friend, and it's a machine-readable format describing persons and activities and their relations to other people and objects. And every social media on the planet will use this ontology to organize the content that the social media is sharing. So it's an ontology that shows how knowledge is shared across the social media. And it looks like this. I'm not going to say any questions because that's a little over the edge maybe, but it does include the areas and the concepts. In this case, we call it classes that you would find in a social media. So online gaming account, persons, image objects, profiles, documents, etc. So it is a structure defining the knowledge that we share via social media. QualiWare also uses ontologies in other areas where it's not human sharing of knowledge. For example, here is an application architecture diagram. These two systems are sharing some knowledge, and that point right there, the access point, is called an API, and there's a standard called OpenAPI. That's the physical layer defining how these two systems communicate. Now, if we move up to a logical layer, or what we call a platform independent layer, we can reverse engineer that physical layer into an ontology and back into logical models such as data models and class diagrams. And we can go the other way. So if you have a data model diagram and you want to pick a subset of that and use for an open API application integration, we can generate the API from that logical ontology. So it's a very nice way of organizing data that you know and you want to communicate. So let's take a look at a concrete example on how can we help Ken create models. Here's a process network, and the first business process up here is called book car. If I want to create a workflow diagram for book car, what would I normally do? I would invite my friends and colleagues. We would go into a room. We would put yellow stickers on the wall, organize them. After a couple of hours, we would be in agreement on how does this workflow diagram look, and then we would go and draw that in QualiWare. That's the normal way. Now, in the modern world where we use AI services, what do we do then? Well, first of all, we look at the context that this business process exists in. And we can see there's a business event defining or starting, initiating, or triggering the process. There is a green booking object, business object that comes out of the process. The process may have description and responsibles and things like that behind it. So we will grab that context, and then we will add prompts, details, expected results in a format that the AI service will understand. And then we will send that off to the AI service somewhere in California, and it will come back as a beautiful diagram, great help and good ideas for the future. That is the vision. Now, how do we know how to communicate with the AI service? We need to organize the communication with the AI service, just as we organize the communication with between systems and from Barbie to Ken in general, or the other way. So let's take a look at that. We've defined what we call a knowledge scope. And the knowledge scope has a specific purpose. This is the knowledge that we have in the repository that we want to share with the AI service in order to get a nice diagram back. So in other words, in order to communicate with the AI service, we need to know what it is that we're going to share. Also, there's a little bit of a controversial part to this. How much do you share with the rest of the world? Are you interested in sharing your entire management system or enterprise architecture? Or are you interested in sharing nothing? Or how do you want to work with it? Russell will come back to that a little later. But certainly, we need a knowledge scope. And this knowledge scope has been designed to generate the workflow diagram. You can see this is a dialog from a QualiWare object. You can see it's a knowledge scope, and it generates the workflow diagram. And then there are certain things that we want to include in that knowledge scope in order to communicate with the AI service. For example, what type of business are we talking about here? Well, it's a book car, so it's a rental car company. We have a link to an object defining the type of business that will help the AI service understand what type of document or diagram we're interested in. Then we can say, okay, what do we have some examples of this? If we have examples, can we ship them with the to the knowledge scope? Do we have structures that we want to build? You can see here we are building an ontology, and we'll take a look at that. And then there may be other things that we want to share with the AI service. For example, additional characteristics. We can have some text, build a workflow diagram that blah blah blah. Examples again, response types. So what response do we expect? How much sort of correctness or randomness do we expect the AI service to do? Is it predictable or is it very random? So that every time we ask the same question, we get different results, or every time we ask the same question, we get the same result. That is the knowledge scope. Now, there's one thing here that is crucial. That is, what do we share with the knowledge, with the AI service? And we use an ontology for that. So this is an ontology. Again, remember we were at this yellow fish, the business process, and we wanted to generate a workflow diagram. And I don't know if you can see my mouse, but in this phase here, the root object that we start from is the business process. And what do we know about the business process? Well, we know the name, the short description, the purpose, and the description. These are all text fields. Danny, du skal lige afbryde. So we have this business process template, and we know some text fields. Then we also have a good idea of who owns this, who's responsible for this process, who's involved in the process. And you can see here the target class, the target template that we accept here is the position. So if the business process linked to a person, which it can do actually in QualiWare, we are not going to send that person's name to California. We only want to share the owner, the responsible, if it points to a position, and we only want to share the name for that position. We could also share something else, but we only want to share the name. And so there's an IT support. We know we want to share the names of the systems we're using. We want to share the concepts, information concepts that this business process is communicating and manipulating. We want to share the start and end event for the business process, and we want to share the objects that it produces or uses as input. So in other words, we have the context that we talked about before defined by this ontology. And then, of course, for the at the bottom here for the workflow diagram, we also share the graph syntax, so we get a decent graph returned. And this is something that Russell will also talk about a little later. So, in other words, we want to work with ontologies for the knowledge sharing. We want the ontology to be configurable so that depending on what type of diagram you want to have created, you can generate an ontology to communicate and to get the feedback from the AI service in order to organize and share knowledge and make sure that that knowledge produces the right results. So, and with this, let me hand over to Russell. Russell, take it away.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'd like to start talking about just AI in general. And if you could...
Oh, actually, that was a little premature, wasn't it?
Yes, just go. Yes. So when talking about AI in general and AI in enterprise architecture, an important thing is understanding that AI is a tool to be used to increase output. A lot of people see this as a displacement or a replacement for the actual work, but realizing how powerful AI is as a tool for you can really increase your output if you put it to use correctly. I've also written that AI can be the greatest teacher. This is something I've come to know, for it has taught me a lot of things myself in my personal experience. And it has a really powerful way of sharing knowledge, which our EA tool is all about. I've written knowledge transformation because it can transform the knowledge, not from what the creator thought of, but from what the receiver needs. So some piece of knowledge that is a single piece of information can be transformed into every person's needs. So if I don't understand a type of diagram, I don't understand this text or this book or this PDF document, anything, I can use AI to transform the knowledge into a piece of knowledge that I understand. And this can be used in EA a lot and in our tool specifically as well. The AI's range of intelligence. I wrote this because I always like to say that AI can be stupid and very smart. It always depends on the task ahead of it. So usually for every task that there is a slider that goes between the AI's knowledge and a normal human being's knowledge. And every task is going to be laying somewhere on this slider between the computer and the human for who has the most easy way of fulfilling this task. And a good example is math. Math is very easy for a computer, but could be very hard for a human. And every task will be like this. So looking at the AI's range of intelligence and identifying where every task is on this slider is very important for using AI. And I would also like to say that currently we're using AI and it's in its infancy. What we're seeing now is the start of this huge wave of AI, and more money and more research is being pumped into AI. So problems we're seeing now with AI might not be a problem in a year or so. And we can already see new models, new training files, and even new implementations, new ideas of how to use this in ways we didn't think of before has created or has removed these problems we have. So we're just testing the waters here with AI, and we will have to keep being updated and looking at all the new stuff in the world of AI to even keep up with this. And then I would also like to say that I think everyone should jump into AI and get to know it, because this really helps you identifying its capabilities and identifying where this AI can create value. So it's a little bit how I said before with the AI's range of intelligence, that everything's on this slider, and identifying what tasks are really easy for the AI and what tasks are really hard for a human being. If we can implement AI in these steps, then maybe we can create immense value. And this is also effective in our product today, actually. And the overview of this exact implementation we have done in QualiWare is generation of diagrams, as Kuno said earlier. And right when you press this button, generate diagram, what really happens is it identifies and understands the context. It then constructs the ontological mapping from the ontology that Kuno showed earlier. It then uses this ontology to extract the data from your repositories, and only that data, which has been specified in the ontology. It transformed the data set for AI interpretation, which is right now the input and output from this AI will always be text, or right now, how we use it. So we input text and we get an output of text. So we have to take these objects, which are repositories objects in our program, and convert them to text. So we get the output, which is also a text, but is now the output of a new diagram. And we create objects with this output, and then we take these objects, we integrate them into the web modeler, and then we have a separate non-AI service going that creates the layout from what it received. And actually, I think I should try to show you something in our product. I'll share my screen here. Let's see. Are everyone able to see? Okay.
Yeah, can see it.
Awesome. So this is a regular desktop we have in our test repository. I'll go in the enterprise management system and I'll go into provide product. And right here, we have this book car process, which right here, if you look on the right side, you can see it has a bit of a description. It has a description that tells how this process goes. And it has a bunch of links and owners and all these relationships. And then we have a process over here, which has absolutely no description. All it has is a name and its links. So the AI will have a hard time creating not a hard time creating a diagram, but a hard time creating a diagram that is correct for your business when there is no description. It will most likely create a diagram, but it will have to do a lot of the thinking on its own, or it will make up processes or activities actually. But let's try the book car, which has we've described a bit how this process goes. So I open the diagram in the editor. I then select the book car and I press our new button right here. I get this window up, which then shows me what knowledge scope is selected and what context. So the knowledge scope that Kuno talked about earlier is called Generate Workflow Diagram. The context is the book car symbol process that we pressed on right before. Input, I could put some extra information here, anything maybe from a Word diagram or something you forgot to put in there, or maybe even a specification of the output you want. That you could say, I want 10 activities. I want to be more precise and bigger descriptions or shorter descriptions. And sometimes, not always, it will listen to this because it is AI. It's getting a lot of information and it's not deterministic. It won't give you the same answer every time. So, but in this case, I'll just let it generate from the context it already has. It will then open the web modeler in a new tab, which is the book car workflow diagram now. And right now, it's sending all the context to the AI, which is then generating the textual version of a diagram, which we then turn into a diagram. And we see here its version of a workflow diagram, which has a bunch of activities on here. And you can see all the activities have a little short description where it says what's actually happening in these activities. And the layout will never really be perfect, but then again, it is that the AI is a tool, and these diagrams it creates are not meant to be finished diagrams. It's the first draft or the idea where we can start from. It's instead of having this blank page, we now have a diagram we can start from. And it's actually based on something from your repository. So you could add some other symbols, you could make it smaller, change the layout, whatever you desire. But this is the start. And then I would also like to try to take this other symbol or this other process, which had no description, and just see what happens. Because really all it gets here is actually perform overhaul, just the name of it. And it'll try to make something. It could be crazy, it could be good, it could possibly be correct, but it doesn't really know much when not giving all the context. So it creates something like this where it'll typically look like what a generic process called perform overhaul would look for a company. And I mean, generic is in many times also could be correct, but probably not. And if we go outside the web modeler here, we just discard this. I would also like to show a more less context heavy and a little bit more free way of actually using this AI. So I will create a new business process diagram. I'll call it AI Showcase. I'll now open the web modeler. And right here, we have created another knowledge scope for the business process diagrams. I press on this button. You can see it now has chosen the generate business process diagram instead of the workflow diagram. And the actual choosing of the knowledge scopes can be done in two ways. Right now, the only available or the only possible knowledge scope I can use in this situation is this one, and then it will always be chosen. If there are more knowledge scopes, maybe you have two different knowledge scopes for creating business process diagrams, they will come up in a list and you can choose them. But right now, we only have this one, so it just auto chooses this one. Here, we have no context. So right now, it doesn't really know anything else than it's supposed to create a business process diagram. I can then input anything I want here. It could be the description of a process from a Word diagram. It can be from another system. It can be a way of easily inputting a bunch of text and getting something looking like a diagram out of it. I could write something very simple. I could say the process of designing a car, just that. And I'll do Control-G to generate diagram, or I'll press right here. It now generates with just these words, a diagram, and it doesn't have a lot to work with in this situation, but it'll again do some type of generic, how would a business process diagram look for something like this. Okay. And if something like that happens, I can always just do it again. Designing a car. Okay, I'll do Control-G. And it's very easy to actually press the button again, because a lot of the times getting the diagram you want, it doesn't happen on the first time. So you have to press it again. It seems that it does not want to do it with that description. We could also try opening another diagram. Here, if I do like this, I'll try one last time here. Designing a car for, yeah, this should be enough. Generate diagram. And even the other diagram we saw where it created something, if I thought that was acceptable, I could have just pressed that button. It would delete the entire diagram and it would generate a new one. So actually creating these diagrams and creating new revisions, it doesn't have to be the correct diagram. It does the first time. So like here, I would move this up. And see, it does a little crazy diagram here where some of the stuff, it uses a lot of gateways and stuff. And it's doing something from nothing, which is more than you would start with otherwise. But a much more valuable way would also be you have these long text and descriptions of actual processes here. But I think that is enough for just showing the implementation we have here. And also this implementation inside of QualiWare is just we're testing the waters with AI right now. And as Kuno said, there are more ways we can affect this knowledge sharing process than actually creating the content. There are a lot of different ways. And we're using the early stages of AI here of actually trying to create something that can create value. And we'll continue to do so. It's something that we definitely feel that has a future in enterprise architecture. And as more people get their hands on it and more people try to research and the actual technology gets better and better, we'll see huge improvements in this area. So we're very excited to see the where this technology can take us and how it'll look next year or even after that. Yeah.
So Russell, you had some comment on you could take Word files and then just paste the text into the Word file into the generator, and it would generate a nice diagram. What are the criteria for that to happen?
I mean, really, is the only criteria is you have text. So it doesn't even have to be a Word diagram. It can be PDF. It can be anything. It can be very structured data. It can be unstructured data. It just really needs to be text, and you just put it into this input field right here. And it'll take this, all this input field tells the AI is, this is the context you need to create something from. And it already has a lot of information about it. So it already has a lot of information about how it should make the diagram from the knowledge scope, but not actually information about what the actual context is. Also, a thing I forgot to tell about is you can also open this part right here, which links right now. I've just given it all templates, so I can choose any template. Usually you would say, I would only like to use business processes. I would only like to use activities, and then only that type of template would come up here. And then I can select them and use them as context. Like I can show you, I can use an activity here. I'll do, or I can even take a person like this. I'll take these two people, which is highly irregular. You would ever take two people to create something. But when I select it, you can see they're on the context now. And this is done because in the knowledge scope, you have 4 different ways of doing context. And 2 of them, this link button context will be available. And one of them is just called choose from list, which is, this is the only type of context. So you just open a diagram and this is the only type of context you use. And yeah, but
so when you have, if you have a Word file, you can say, I want to use context. Is that used as a sort of boundary, or is it examples, or how would it interpret that?
It would interpret it as the information it needs to create the content. So the actual base of the diagram. It won't use it as an example or as inspiration. It'll use it as the actual content that is supposed to be put in the diagram, unless you specify otherwise. Because right now in the query we send in, it is put as the actual context it needs to be used to create the diagram. But I would fair to say that if you tell it that this context right here should be used as inspiration for how it uses the connections, then it would listen. But it's AI, and you never really know how it'll take the query.
You can just talk to it and
you can
guide it to.
You can talk to it and tell it. You could tell it that this is an activity, this is a gateway, and that'll make it very easy for it. But you can also have it way more unstructured, just someone talking, or even a transcript of someone talking. Just put it in, and it'll generate something. So that's also one thing about the information transformation, is that or knowledge transformation. It's very good at taking one type of knowledge and transforming it into another. So unstructured data, structured data, all that, very easy for it.
We do have a question, and I think it's maybe a good opportunity while we're on this point. Is there one of the questions, that the first question is more of a technical question. Is there a character limit for the input field at the moment?
So in our product, there's not actually a character limit, but in the actual AI, there's something called a token limit. And token limit varies heavily on which model you use. And which model you use will be chosen for each customer as you set up your large language model or your OpenAPI ChatGPT. And there are models varying from 4,000 tokens to 128,000 tokens. And tokens are their way of tokenizing length of a document, which, I mean, a word such as hello could be 3 tokens usually. And it's very hard to actually say what 128,000 tokens or what 4,000 tokens is. But the actual length of what an AI can take, there is a very specific limit to that. And it will always be specified in the model very, very apparently how many tokens it can take.
What happens if you use too many tokens?
If you use too many tokens, it actually has a way of condensing the information, which usually means it just forgets something you wrote, because it needs room to answer. And if it doesn't have room to answer within your tokens, it'll forget something you said to create the answer. So, and also usually I see that the more information you put in, or the more tokens you put in, the less the actual everything you say actually means something. So it's like it's a drop in the ocean. So if you wrote something very important and then a bunch of not so important stuff, it'll weigh the not so important stuff just as much as the very important stuff, which is a problem. So being deliberate and sparse in what data actually goes in, and this is, of course, when you want to have a lot of data, that this is important. But that's very important to really use your characters and your words sparsely.
What does it prioritize? What does it choose to throw away?
Usually it chooses to throw away, because there's different types of messages. There's the system message, there's a user message, and there's an assisted message. The system message is something you set up to it to kind of set it as a template. What should you do? What are you used for? You'll be like, you are a friendly chatbot created for QualiWare, could be the system message. The user message is the actual message the user sends. The assisted message is the message that it generates. And all this is sent back and forth every time, the whole conversation. And it will usually always forget the user messages. So the messages you sent in, excuse me. And so the system message, it will usually remember what's your personality, what are you supposed to do? And in this use case that we have right here, the user message is the input field. So if it's a huge amount of data that actually goes over what model you choose, then it will forget something, and the prioritization is kind of a black box. It's on the OpenAI side and the actual model you choose side of how they forget. But it will forget something you put in the input field. So yeah.
We have something called prompt in the knowledge scope.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about it.
So in the knowledge scope, we have a template we put in called prompt. This prompt it actually comes right beside this input in the query for the AI. And it's usually used for something you would write here, but you would write every time. So what I've used it for is creating some rules. So I set up rules for naming of diagrams, naming of symbols. I set up rules for how it should use different symbols. And, you know, something you want it to happen every time, and you want it to be quite important, because these prompts, it sees that the last part of the user message is something it listens the most to. And this prompt will be at the very end of the user message. So it's something that it actually really listens to. That also means that you should use it correctly and wisely, because if you lead it astray in this prompt right here, then it will almost always be wrong. So I've used it for rules, setting up how I want it to do different things, or if something I've written in the system message in other parts of the knowledge scope, it won't listen to that. I'll try with the prompt as well, because it's when using AI, it's not really black and white. It's not really binary at all. It's all of you try and see, because it takes and it understands and it learns in another way that we really haven't seen before. It's not really mechanical in a way. It understands. So just trying things out, trying different inputs, trying different data types, more structured, less structured. I would just try it out to see what works best for you, and you then identify where it's the strongest. Definitely.
There is another question as well in terms of, we know that this is already available, as you mentioned, for business process diagram. When are we going to be looking at expanding this potentially to something like Archimate, which is one of the questions? Obviously, there's a Archimate user who sees value in this. So not sure if we put thought into that.
Yeah, I mean, there are kind of two answers to this. We'll definitely be starting to create more knowledge scopes for more diagrams and following the principles we have, but actually creating new knowledge scopes will be available for everyone, even customers or users of QualiWare. The only thing that has problems is the layout. A lot of the time, the layout cannot be done by the AI. So it will usually just put the symbols and the connections on the board, and then it will maybe not make something that looks as usual. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But that's, I think, the biggest technical difficulty in actually adding more and more diagrams to these knowledge scopes is the layout, and not actually the generation of the symbols, the connections, and the descriptions, and all the activities and stuff like that. That's not the hard part right now. It's actually doing the layout.
I can also add a little bit. In the knowledge scope, you can define what type of diagram you want, a symbol you want back. So,
Yes.
so it works with Archimate. It works with all the diagrams that
Yes.
we have in the tool today. It's just that we have defined a couple of examples of knowledge scope that you can get, but it's really up to you guys to say, if I want to generate a layered view or layered viewpoint in Archimate, where you have like I don't know, 60 different type of symbols. Do I want all those symbols generated, or do I only want actors and business processes and application components? Because then you have to tell the knowledge scope that this is the type of layered view you want. If you do that, it will create a layered view with those three types of objects and nothing else. So it's up to you to define that knowledge scope that works exactly for the purpose that you have in mind.
Exactly.
Another very interesting question, which I think could be very relevant, is, could the input to this be an audio file? So somebody describing a process verbally. And this is an interesting question, I think, because if I were to consider myself sitting in a workshop, for example, with some business stakeholders, and we're maybe workshopping how a process should work, the ability to kind of hear that audio and obviously translate that into a process, is that something that we've thought about?
It is something we thought about a lot. So all different kinds of types of input, which turns into your context, is very interesting. It is not something we have right now, but it's something that could be implemented in the future, and we will look at implementing in the future if we deem necessary. But there are not only audio file. It could be pictures. It could be actual documents or actual files. A folder with a bunch of Word files, or the possibilities are endless with these input. But yeah, voice is definitely something, and all it will be done is this: you just implement some voice to text, and then the text will be put in the input field. That's the simple implementation that will be used if we do this. And that's a very interesting take, because I think for many people it will be very relevant.
Isn't that just standard functionality in Windows? They can say, transcribe this audio to a text, and then you get it in there.
Exactly. It is very. It's
not something we have to do anything for.
It's apparent in outside programs where you just get the text, and you can just take this text and implement it in the input field.
And I think something that I often think about is, and something that you mentioned, Russell, as well, is that for me, it's not about how the diagram looks. It's about QualiWare and AI helping me get started is the first thing.
Yes.
It might be a subject matter that I'm not familiar with, for example. Where do I get started? It could also be an opportunity for me to kind of get a lot of kind of bulk information into QualiWare quickly. So I might, for example, say there's a new regulatory framework that's come out that could be of interest to me, and I need to create those regulations and describe them in QualiWare. That could be a time-consuming process for someone to actually do the research, go ahead and, you know, copy and paste text and find all this information. And I see this as a great accelerator for those kinds of tasks. Yeah, so do you have any thoughts on that?
No, yeah, definitely. The AI definitely helps with a lot of these tasks of clicking, copying, creating new symbols and moving them around, and it can do this very rapidly. And excuse me, let me just get some more. And in a like all right, accurate way, actually. It I mean, even if you tell it, take this info and use it directly. Don't transform it, don't look at it and try to understand it and then write something new, but actually take this information and use it directly in creating the diagram. It will do so. And that will, so if you don't want this variability of AI changing something that could be right into something that could be wrong, maybe just because it changes the words, then tell it, use this directly and just create the diagram for me. And so I think a lot of people have expressed that they have this many diagrams they have to create, and the AI layer we have here can just cut down on the just entry to barrier, just having something and a start that they then can take to the partners or the stakeholders that need to see the actual diagrams and help create something of value of that is actually more accurate. So yes, all this manual work can be done a lot quicker with AI. It's where it has some of the capabilities we've identified that it can create a lot of value there.
Russell, you've chosen to implement this and deploy this in a special way that is not exactly the way we normally install software at a client site. Could you tell us a little bit about how we can make sure that we keep this on the toast, basically, and keep it relevant for clients?
Yes. So the new Quali AI we've implemented here is actually not really in the product code that is shipped out to customers in what's updated on release schedule. We have it as an external document, as an external script, we would like to say, and it is then just loaded by the product after 10.9 or the next release. And this does that we can, between release schedules, we can update this code, we could fix bugs, we could change anything that might come from the feedback for the users here. So it's much more flexible and faster fixes and faster improvements to all this new stuff we've added this way. So, I mean, we're really looking forward to anyone actually using this and seeing that all of their feedback. So we maybe could change and improve this instantly, actually. So it's something we'll get to work to after the release. Yeah.
Great. Just another question. I know we only have 7 minutes left, but there's a question specifically with the example of ISO 27001, I would imagine. Is it possible to model that in a structured way and then have that in the repository? So would you be able to, and I'm not saying now, but at some point, say to QualiWare, build an ISO standard for me with the regulations? Would that be possible?
I mean, you would have to find some type of diagram that could represent this standard and then describe it to the AI, and then it will do it in its best ability. And I think it'll definitely be doable. And as there's not really a precedent for this as much, I think it will be quite a productive and quite a good implementation, I would think. So I would say yes.
It's an interesting question, actually, because if you go to a strategy model where you have regulations and processes and risk and everything as objects, like a little bit like you do in Archimate, a lot of symbols on the same diagram type, you should be able to do that already with the current implementation. You know, what are the rules in 27001? It definitely would know that. And what are the typical processes if you're a car manufacturer or a brewery? What are the typical processes that would comply with those regulations in 27001? It could be interesting to try that out, because it is, you know, there's no difference, I think, in the question that we have for the book car context and the rental car company and the 27001. It's just knowledge.
Exactly. And I think that actually brings up quite an interesting thing I would like to touch on really quick, which is with AI, there's two approaches to getting the information you want. There's querying this knowledge base that the ChatGPT has of the internet, and there's querying data you give it. So let's take this example of the ISO standard. And you could create a model, say create a model from this ISO standard, and it would create the model from its inherent knowledge of the standard. Or you could link a document or give it some information about this model and say create a diagram from this information. And some things it is very knowledgeable about and would have no problem just using the actual inherent information it has been trained on this model. And other things, it would definitely be best to append this knowledge to the actual input, because it'll, and also you can choose how this knowledge is put in, and if it's your own knowledge, you can it would only be you that knew it, not the internet. So I think you always have to think about, am I going to rely on the actual information of the model, or am I going to append some extra, give it a knowledge base, say this is your Bible, this is what you should listen to before answering my question.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because being able to use authoritative information, it almost allows you to reach a point where the AI can evaluate the correctness of something as well, is maybe the evolution of it, where you know, you have existing data and you might want the AI to check that it's correct according to what the textbook says, so to say. So I think that the opportunities are almost endless. And as you guys mentioned, you know, I don't want to say it's in its infancy, because we have had this kind of element of capability in QualiWare for quite some time, but the way that it's implemented now is very exciting. And I appreciate the questions that everyone has asked. We only have 2 minutes left. So I think, you know, if anyone wants to quickly sneak in a question there, that's all right. But if there are any more questions, I think that, you know, everyone is more than welcome to reach out to us, and we'd love to, you know, have follow-up conversations if anyone is interested in that rather. And also, yeah, just to say thank you to Kuno and Russell for preparing this and sharing your knowledge with us. Really appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Kuno, any closing thoughts?
No, I just want to say that from a product strategy point of view, we'll continue evolving our effort on AI being a tool for knowledge sharing. It's natural that AI services is a logical part of this, and we see a lot of applications for AI services in the tool. I mentioned a few in the beginning. Next focus area, the ability for Barbie to actually get help in understanding the model is next in line. We think we've done quite well. I think Russell has done a great job creating the models. So Ken is okay, I would say, but Barbie still needs a little bit of help from AI services, and we'll focus on that from now on.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, thank you everybody for your time. Greatly appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, everybody.